Star Wars: The Adventures of Serian Kall. First Steps. Chapter 8. Everything was silent for a lingering pause as the masked killer slowly made their way towards Serian and Lena. Between talking so much about them and only witnessing their appearance via hologram, to see them in person was unnerving in the mildest description. They were at least a foot and a half taller than Serian, with dexterous build and imposing in nature. Serian held to his stance. His breath paused as he focused. A few feet behind him was where Alina now pulled herself up from a heap. The killer stared Serian up and down for a pause before finally speaking.
Not the Jedi I hoped to find here. All in due time, I guess.
You killed all those people just to get to a Jedi? Serian asked, his body growing tense as the figure drew closer. They scoffed, lowering their masked face down to the ground.
You mustn't have learned much in our pedagogy, young one. Even after all you have learned of this place, you still draw naivety.
Then tell me what this is about. Tell me, please. Turning an entire city upside down, the fear, the slaughter, the murder. What drives you to all of this? What is this about? As the figure continued their approach, Serian pointed his blade towards them before they finally quit pace. You will not come any closer.
I did not come all this way to seek your permission, child.
The figure growled, unsheathing two vibro daggers from their belt.
Now step out of my way.
Is that a request? Serian asked, raising an eyebrow somewhat tauntingly.
Not a request. A warning.
Serian's eyes widened with fear for just a blink. Looking around, he realized there was nowhere left to run. He had what he wanted right in front of him. The mission was not yet over. Warning acknowledged. Swiping his blade back around his head, Serian charged the killer, reversing his move into a heavy cleave towards their chest. The figure remained still before jumping and backflipping to avoid the attack. Serian raised his blade once more, preparing to deliver a follow-up strike, as the killer suddenly raised one of their gauntlets to block it. Upon striking the armor, Serian's blade suddenly began to tiercely fizz and zap before shorting out, catching the young Jedi off guard. Using the momentary distraction to their advantage, the killer lunged towards Serian, thrusting their daggers toward him as they swiped and slashed with vicious intent. Serian had been forced to drop his disabled saber to the ground and proceeded to block the incoming attacks with hand-to-hand combat. Reaching his arms over the blades and to the hand that held them, attempting to push and redirect them aside in quick succession. The figure recoiled their attack pattern, breaking off their next attack as they spun around before throwing a kick straight into Serian's bandages around his rib, knocking him back as he shouted in pain, clutching his wound before promptly throwing both of his hands up and catching the fists holding the two incoming daggers pointed straight at his face as the killer pushed down upon him, overpowering him into a retreat. As the two strained, a blaster shot whizzed towards them as the killer broke off their attack, jumping and flipping away as Serian turned to see Alina, now standing, her blaster raised as she took several more shots at the attacker, who dodged and flipped past every bolt fired. Serian took the opportunity to pull his lightsaber to his hand with the force, straining as his eyes tightened. The killer evaded several more shots as Alina continued her barrage before leaping into the air, empowering their jump with a bolster from the force as they charged the lone armed woman, aiming one of their daggers downwards towards her. Seeing the attack coming, Alina rolled to the side, narrowly eschewed the blade which dug into the dirt. Throwing out her leg, Alina kicked the attacker before wrapping it around the back of the Togrutan's neck, using the leverage to pull herself up and land another kick with her foot. The killer grunted as they thrust upward and tackled Alina in a grapple, dropping the daggers as they proceeded to grab her throat and strangle her. Alina struggled and gagged for breath as her eyes stared directly into the mask and goggles of the killer. Suddenly, they ducked down closer to Alina as a sapphire blue blade swung over the figure's head, releasing their grip. Alina took advantage of the moment and headbutted the figure, who lifted upwards as Alina lifted her free hand and punched the figure, cracking the glass on one of their goggle lenses. The killer rose to their feet, evading several more incoming strikes from Serian before kicking him away and removing the goggles in a fuss, their strained hazel eyes now visible for the first time. Serian prepared himself once more into a defensive stance. He was already feeling his body begin to fail on him. All of his muscles screamed for rest and his head grew faint. For all his might and his extensive combat training with the Jedi, he had to remind himself that he was still just human, and in this moment now, a human that was in no condition to fight. But in this moment, such hardly mattered. The attacker lunged at Serian once more with the ferocity of a wild Nexu uncaged, delivering a whirling of whipping slashes and cuts. Serian was forced to fall back and evade. One cut managed to cut through the lower sleeve of his robe, lacerating his arm as he cried out in pain, dropping his saber. Not allowing the killer's opening to be taken to advantage, Serian weaved beside one of the figure's next jabs before throwing himself into a side flip, kicking the Togruta square in the face, knocking away their mask as Serian then screamed and collapsed in pain. His legs may have been bandaged from his wounds, but that did not change the fact that those bandages were wrapped around gaping impalements from the collapsed shrapnel stabbing into him. The figure did not relent for a movement, quickly throwing out their hand and pushing Serian away with a wave of the Force, as he fell into a heap next to Alina, desperately trying to force himself up. The killer, now unmasked, stared the young Jedi down, holding one of their daggers pointed towards him. Serian could now make out their entire face. An orange-skinned Togruta, female in gender, with hazel brown eyes and a series of light scars across her right cheek.
For a Padawan, you put up quite a fight. You're well trained in the Jedi arts.
My master taught me well, Serian rebutted. I guess I can't say the same about yours. To that, the figure merely smirked, humoured by the taunt.
How little you know of the past.
Serian raised an eyebrow as he leaned forward. Was I supposed to know about you?
No, not necessarily. But I'm sure Jalius Saren has done a fantastic job covering up his failures.
In that moment, Serian's mind clicked, his eyes growing shocked and confused at the same time. You're his former Padawan. You're Rele Norales.
So he does still talk about me. I wonder if he has told you what really happened that fateful day.
He told me that you disagreed on a mission, that you went rogue and went missing ever since.
Oh, I believe you. That's certainly one way of putting it.
What are you trying to get at?
I'm warning you, young Jedi. For your own sake, our master is not all he claims to be.
So his first apprentice turned out a failure. I find it hard to believe that such was his fault alone. You're a failed excuse for a Jedi.
I have you at my mercy, don't I?
That would be a first for you. After the trail of blood and death you've left behind?
Hardly innocent blood.
But it is still blood. People are dead, and the rest are left terrified, Serian argued, rising slowly to his feet, gritting his teeth in pain as he did. Murder is still murder. Rele's charmed expression then darkened, a searing glare coming across her eyes.
You really haven't learned anything in all of this, have you, Jedi?
I know about Elena Thorne. I know that she was killed by Frickett and Albus to cover up Zahol's weapons and their shared fortune.
Do you know the trail of blood those very weapons have spilled all across the galaxy?
Rele asked coldly, causing Serian to fall silent.
I've traveled the stars for many years since I left the Order. In that time, I discovered just how sick and unruly this galaxy really is. Syndicates, mobs, crime gangs litter the entire universe on a scale hitherto undreamt of. using powerful weapons to assert their claims and decimate anyone in their paths. Men, women, children, all victims of an ignorant and pacifist system.
Serian felt a lump form in his throat as she spoke. That's what led you here.
I suspected that if I traced the source of these weapons, I could prevent their creation from the source. I managed to discover their construction here after I captured a few goons on Ord Cestus, selling one to a filthy hut.
If you already knew about the weapons, how did you find out about Elena? Serian asked, growing intrigued to the former Jedi's story.
You're asking me who could have given top-secret government information to a contract killer.
Serian remained entranced in a state of confusion, 1,000 contradicting thoughts all mashing together against each other. The revelation of his master's former apprentice being behind all of this left him spiraling with questions. How was she alive? How had she fallen from grace so spectacularly? What could have caused such a rift between her and Master Serian? More than that was the former Jedi's actions that left him in strife. Was she right? Certainly not, he had to think. Murder was an act of evil. Such had been ingrained into his mind since childhood, written in text for thousands of generations. Yet that murder in her eyes was in the name of preventing 5 times as much. Even so, such an extreme to prevent another extreme was perhaps an over-exaggeration. Cruelty mistaken for justice. What's your endgame here, Relay? The violence, the fear, where does it end?
I came here to destroy Project Silencer and all the corruption that forged it. When I'm done, I will expose the truth to everyone on this planet, and the coward Tora Blom's head will be planted upon a spike.
Tora Blom may have used you against Frickett, but killing him the same way won't change anything. Relay winced in response, her resolve molding back into an offended anger.
He's a politician just as Frickett was, regarded only by the rich and the greedy. He never cared about Elena or her story. This plan was to use me to scare the fool and force him to admit the truth himself, to sabotage his campaign, not to avenge her. You kill a weed not by cutting its hedge, but by purging the soil from which it grows.
Treating death and destruction with only more of it does not solve the problem. It only gives it a new label.
And you would just let them get arrested, assuming the authorities on the payroll aren't just as corrupt as them?
I have faith in justice. In mercy.
Faith does not keep children sleeping soundly at night.
Relay scowled, turning her gaze over to the weapon.
Fear is what silences the terrors in the dark.
Lifting her hand and stretching it outwards, channeling her full strength as she targeted Project Silencer. After several seconds of concentration, the metal hull of the weapon began to creak and shift, before suddenly bending and warping as sparks began to ignite into flames. Smoke and exhaust releasing into a massive cloud, before engulfing the remains of the weapon in a storm of soot and flame. The metal heating and tearing apart as Project Silencer was finally put to an end, just as it had been finished. Serian watched on in both shock and amazement at the demonstration of power before his eyes. Relay turned back to face the young student.
Fear is what's going to win this war. Remind our master to teach you that.
As she prepared to make her escape, Relay soon found her senses go off as Serian turned to see another speeder charging straight toward the Togruta killer, who leapt into the air, topped off with a backflip to evade the charging vehicle. Once landing on the ground, Relay spun around, throwing up her Cortosis gauntlet as she blocked the strike from another sapphire blade before locking the grapple of her new attacker, Kaiser Cersei, soaked in soot and blood but standing determined, staring the killer dead in the eyes.
I have no more time to waste on you, child.
Relay snarked, knocking Kaiser back with a headbutt before using the force to hurl her away into a heap, before making her way towards Kaiser's scavenged speeder. Seating herself aboard, she took to the controls, driving the vehicle around before approaching the remains of what was Project Silencer. Lifting her hand, Relay targeted Alina and Serian's speeder, levitating it into the air before violently dropping it to the ground, before leaving the three fighters to their fates, as she prepared to finish her brutal conquest at long last.